This might be the worst murder in Japan's history. This is 17-year-old Junko Furuta. And on November 25th, 1988, Junko left school and was walking home, but she never made it home that day. She was kidnapped by a group of young men, including a 17-year-old who was identified as Joe, and would be later given the surname Kamasaku. They kept her captive in the house that was owned by Kamasaku's parents, and that was the beginning of her 44 days of torture. Her abductors had no grudge against her, and there was nothing specific they were after. They just attacked her and abducted her because they could. The group repeatedly beat, raped, and tortured Junko. They also invited other men and teenage boys over to the home, and encouraged all of them to take turns on Junko. They shaved her pubic hair, they forced her to dance naked in front of them and touch herself in front of them. They left her on the balcony in the middle of the night with little clothing. They inserted objects into her private parts, including a lit match, a metal rod, a bottle, and force-fed her with large amounts of alcohol, milk, and water. She was also forced to smoke multiple cigarettes at once and inhale paint thinner. They even lit her legs and arms on fire with lighter fluid. By the end of December, Junko was severely malnourished after being fed only small amounts of food and eventually only milk. And due to her severe injuries and infected burns, she became unable to go downstairs and use the toilet and became confined to the floor of the room she was in. Junko's appearance was drastically altered from the brutality of the attacks. Her face was so swollen that it was difficult to make out her features. Her body was also very crippled, giving off a rotting smell that caused the 4 boys to lose sexual interest in her. On January 4th, 1989, Junko's captors lost a game against another person the night before and decided to take their anger out on Junko. They poured lighter fluid on her body and set her on fire. Junko made attempts to put out the fire but gradually became unresponsive. They continued to punch her and ignited a candle and dripped hot wax on her face, placed 2 short candles on her eyelids, and forced her to drink her own urine. After she was kicked, she fell onto a stereo unit and collapsed into a fit of convulsions. Since she was bleeding profusely and pus was emerging from her infected burns, the 4 boys covered their hands in plastic bags. They continued to beat her and dropped an iron exercise ball onto her stomach several times. The attack reportedly lasted 2 hours, and Junko eventually succumbed to her wounds and died. Less than 24 hours after her death, the boys were extremely scared of being penalized for murder, so the group wrapped her body in blankets and shoved her into a travel bag. They then put her body into a 55-gallon drum and filled it with wet cement. On January 23rd, 1989, 2 of the boys were arrested for the crimes against Junko, and believing his friend snitched, one of the killers then told the police where to find Junko's body. And the following day, the police found the drum containing Junko's body. I would show the picture of the bin, but it is pretty disturbing and I don't want to show it on here. But if you want to look it up for context, you could. This case is absolutely sickening, and it just goes to prove that there is so much evil in this world. This poor 17-year-old girl went through 44 days of hell, and I could only imagine the psychological and physical pain she went through. Rest in peace to Junko Furuta, and I cannot believe stuff like this happens.